As indie filmmakers, it can seem impossible today to get the film look in today's digital world. You know what I'm talking about. That soft, often imperfect image that film nerds like me still obsess over to this day. Film is really expensive, so how can we get that same look with digital cameras? There's lots of editing plugins that make this process a little bit easier, but a lot of them look really artificial, or if you're just kind of putting an Instagram filter over the top of something, and it doesn't ever look great. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Dehancer, which helps you accomplish this. I'm going to walk you through the app for Premiere Pro and iOS, show you some before and afters, and tell you if I think it's worth buying. Full disclosure, Dehancer did reach out and send me a copy to review. They also gave me an affiliate link, which you can find in the description if you do want to purchase this app. However, besides from the affiliate link, this is an unpaid review and I'm going to try to keep it as unbiased as possible. I appreciate them supporting the channel, but I do need to go through both the good and the bad with this app. I first got my hands on Dehancer around Halloween time. One of my favorite films of all time is Halloween, so I thought it'd be fun to shoot some test footage and try to replicate the look of the film. I'm probably not going to do a very good job, but we're going to try. I'm going to be using Dehancer Pro for Premiere Pro, but they do have versions for After Effects, which also includes Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, photo apps like Photoshop and Lightroom, and again, they also have a version for iPhone and iPad. I should note that I am not a colorist and I'm not very good at color grading, but you should get a sense of what the features and stuff are with this app when we go through the review. I have two primary clips that I shot for this review, a daytime exterior and a nighttime interior. So basically what we're going to be doing is replicating this original shot from the movie as well as this one. A lot of films shot in the 70s and 80s used the Eastman 100T 52-54 film stock. I couldn't confirm 100% that's what they used for Halloween, but I am taking an educated guess because I've seen it used in other John Carpenter films. First off, once you get Dehancer installed, you'll find it in the Effects tab. So we're just going to pull that and drop it on our clips. And then, of course, like any other effects in Premiere Pro, you'll find it in the effects controls. As you can see right from the beginning, we are met with a plethora of options for different settings. And one thing I'll say that's really nice about Dehancer is I feel like there's kind of like a chain of like things you need to be doing, like step 1, step 2, etc., etc. Except I will note that down at the bottom, they do have a false color monitor that you can use and also clipping indication, which can be helpful as you're kind of going through. But aside from that, everything else is pretty sequential. First tab is going to be the input, which is basically like your gamma or your camera's color profile. So you can click here on the source and then you're met with a few different options. You got like Rec 709, Rec 2020, etc. Or you can actually choose the individual camera. Now, it's not going to have every single camera known to man on here, but as you can see, there is a ton of options. I actually shot this and shooting this actual video on my Blackmagic Pocket 4K, which they actually have, so we're going to use that setting. And then you can adjust the exposure, you can adjust the color temperature, the tint, the fringe, etc., etc. So I'm going to go ahead and play around with this for a second. So let me go back to our source image. So as you can see, there's a lot of greens. It's a very warm. There's a lot of blues in my image right now. So we're just going to go ahead and adjust the color temperature a little bit to kind of match that. So already that's looking pretty good. And I don't have it on my Premiere screen here, but I'll throw up the reference image in the corner just so we can kind of keep an eye on it. But you know, it's the kind of tone is matching a little bit here. So once we're done with that, we're going to go into the next one, which is film. And this is actually where you are going to be able to choose a specific color profile based on different film stocks. So you can see we got a bunch of different options here. Unfortunately, they don't have the Eastman, what was it? The Eastman 54-52, I think it was. Let me go back to my notes really quick. 52-54. They don't have that one, but after playing around for a little bit, I did notice that this Kodak Vision 350D was probably the closest thing that I was going to get. It has this very kind of warm tone to it, so I felt that that was the most fitting substitute. And then they also have kind of, you know, how much you can push it. So let's see here. This actually adds a little bit more warmth to it, and this one actually adds a little bit more coolness. So I'm just going to bump that up a little bit just to see what it is. And I mean, that's most of the color grading anyway, right? You're kind of just pushing things to the limits. Yeah, I kind of set myself up there. You want to push things to the limits a little bit just to see what it does and then kind of pull back when needed. And then one nice feature also about Dehancer is that you're actually able to enable and disable whatever effects that you use while you are kind of doing this. And it's not automatically enabled on every single one of these. So if you're like playing around and you don't see something happening, it's possible that the setting just isn't enabled. So let's leave things right there for right now. Let's move on to the next one, which is Film Developer. And then here you're going to play with the contrast, the gamma, color separation, color boost. So let's go ahead and make sure we have it enabled. And let's go ahead and play around with this for a little bit. So let's add some more contrast. There's definitely a lot of contrast in this image. So let's go ahead and push it all the way up. That's a little too much. So let's pull it back a little bit. And that's looking pretty good. We might need to go back and adjust our warmth back up a little bit. Let's boost the color, see what that does. So that added a lot more blue. I definitely liked how it pushes that color up a little bit, especially in the greens. They've definitely pushed the greens up pretty heavily in our reference image. But I'm going to go back to input. Was it input? Yeah, let's go ahead and adjust the temp a little bit. So that's too much blue. Let's get some of that warmth back in there. And pushing that all the way up doesn't fix it completely. Let's see what the tint does. Actually, that did a really nice job right there. So we're going to go ahead and leave that one. So let's go ahead and move on to the next setting, which I believe was film compression. So you have impact, white point, tonal range, color density. I don't really know what any of these are 100%, but we're going to go ahead and play with them and just see what they do. So it looks like it's kind of adjusting some of the highlights. You can see specifically right here when I adjust it, that it's kind of messing around with that a little bit. It's not doing too much, so I'm just going to leave that alone. Let's do the same thing with the white point. Kind of doing the same thing. You can notice more in kind of the highlights where that's making a difference. Tonal range. Okay, so you can see it's kind of boosting. It's changing those highlights a little bit. So let's go ahead and pull this down a little bit because it kind of matches what we got in our reference image here. Then color density. Not much of a change, so let's go ahead and leave that alone for now. And then next we got expand, which is going to play with the black point, the white points. And then you have some profiles here. You got your luma. I'm going to leave that alone. Let's go ahead and adjust the blacks a little bit. Then go ahead and boost up those whites. Too much on the whites. And then of course you could be using a vector scope here, all the different scopes that Premiere offers. I'm not doing that here just because it's just, I'm just kind of eyeballing things here. I'm not trying to be super professional. I just wanted to see, you know, what this software was capable of. Obviously, if I was trying to color grade this a little more professionally, I'd be using the scopes a lot more. But for here, for the purpose of this video, eyeballing it's just fine. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is print. And then we have a bunch of different settings here, different profiles. I'm going to leave that alone. Target white, exposure EV, tonal contrast, saturation, etc., etc. So let's see what this does here. Pull that saturation. We're going to leave that alone. So it looks like you can take some things down a little bit, kind of tone down the image. I'm going to leave that alone just because it looks pretty good. Exposure EV. So as you can see, kind of as we're going through this, there's definitely a lot more nuanced details that you're able to adjust comparatively if you were just going to color grade this image straight into Premiere Pro or something else. Then we got the color head, which is where you're going to be able to adjust some of those other colors. We got yellow and blue, magenta and green, cyan and red. We got the shadows, midtones, highlights. So let's go ahead and play with these a little bit. Of course, I forgot to enable it, so let's go ahead and enable it. Let's play with those yellows and blues. Definitely want to add a little bit more yellow here, but not too much. See how the greens do. Too much green. We definitely want some of that nice autumn red in there, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust that a little bit. Then we got the shadows and so this, yeah, okay, so the shadows and the midtones adjust kind of the warmth of the cooling of the different colors throughout the different parts of the image. So we'll go ahead and do that. And the highlights, let's push that. Definitely a lot more warmth and everything overall. So the impact on here, they have the overall impact. I'm going to jump down for a second where you're able to kind of just take out everything if you want, or just, you know, adjust it slightly. I do wish that this app had this kind of bar on every single one of these different settings, especially once we get down to film grain, and I'll show you why here in a second. But, you know, I just like the ability to be able to kind of tone down every little setting that I'm using. It's, like I said, it's on a bunch of these, but it's not on every single one. So that is kind of one flaw of the overall thing, but not a huge deal. You do have it on a lot of the settings. I just personally would have liked to seen it on every single setting. So let's go ahead and move on to the film grain, which is definitely where you're getting more into those kind of filmy aspects. So you have a few different settings here. You can do a custom amount if you want. I like using the presets. So you got like 8mm, which is obviously going to add a ton of film grain. And this is kind of like where I'd like to be able to take down the impact of this a little bit. They don't have this setting on this one in particular. So like, as you can see here, there's a ton of film grain, which is obviously kind of normal for 8mm film. And it's not like that gross kind of, you know, film grain. It's definitely a lot more accurate to what would be happening for 8mm film. I noticed that the lower ISOs, like the 50s, seem to be a lot more tame. So you can see that it definitely tones it down a lot more. Since this film was shot on 35mm, I'm going to stay true to that. I'm just going to add just a little bit with that 50 ISO with the 35mm. And as you can see, it's not super jarring. It's not super distracting, which I think with the, like, for instance, the 8mm grain is definitely really distracting, and you'd really have to be going for that kind of old school look for certain clips or things like that. Definitely not something for, you know, an entire movie, but, you know, there's just enough here. And, you know, you'd be able, if you want to add more, you definitely have the ability to do that. But I think kind of like the 250 or the 500 is the least distracting for me personally. So that's what I would use. And then these next couple of settings is where I think this software really kind of shines. So we got the halation and bloom settings. So like with film in particular, one of the things that kind of sets film apart is like these little imperfections and things like that. So like with film in particular, you're able to add, you know, it'll have like glowing effects or kind of highlights blown out and stuff like that in certain situations, kind of like a dreamy kind of look. And you're able to do that here. So let's see what we can do. So like with the 8mm, for example, we can actually see, if you look on her shoulders, right there, you can see it kind of blooms out a little bit more. So this would be a really nice effect in certain situations, but even just like a little bit, real subtle. So you can kind of see around her shoulders if you look really up close. I might have to zoom in here on the video, but you can see how it adds just a little bit to the leaves around her shoulders. So let's see how that looks when it plays. And then kind of the same thing here with the bloom. You can see a little bit of, not necessarily blowout, but you can see kind of outlining her. So I mean, that's just something, that's just one of those little details that you're not going to get on a lot of other plugins. Most of these other plugins, they claim they can kind of do the film look, are just going to be grain, and you're able to take this really, really far with all these little different settings, which is definitely a positive thing here for me. So let's go ahead and move down. We got film damage, which this one I would use a little bit more subtly. So this is kind of give you kind of more of that grindhousey kind of look, not too much, but as you can see here, looking at the video, there's just a little bit of imperfections. I might have to go down to 8mm to really show those imperfections. So you can see kind of the scratches and kind of the junk that shows up in the film. This is definitely bringing up some old trauma back when I was a film projectionist. I'm gonna go ahead and leave this off for now because it's not really something that I need for this in particular, but if you're looking for more of that kind of grindhouse or just old beat up film kind of look, you do have the ability to do that. You have vignetting here as well. This is not something I would use in particular with this shot, but it does a really nice job if you're looking for kind of, like I said, maybe if you're trying to go for like a dreamy old school kind of look, you do have the ability to do that here. We're going to go leave that off. We have film breath, which I don't know what that is 100%. So let's see what it does. So it kind of gives it, okay, so we pushed it a little bit with this 8mm kind of look here. You can see how it kind of flickers. So it's kind of like, you know, maybe there's some sort of color distortion with the film, or, you know, like if it was being projected and the bulb was flickering a little bit. Again, there's some trauma going on there. It's a lot more subtle with like 35mm. This is not something I would use in particular unless, you know, for the right case. I'm going to leave that off for now. And then with gate weave, kind of similar. They're going for that kind of shake. If the film was not, you know, threaded properly in the camera and the projector, kind of shakes a bit. 8mm is a bit distracting, so you want to use that pretty sparingly. 35mm isn't too bad, but this isn't something I would use too often, if I'm being honest. But it is a nice feature to have if that is something that you're looking for. So that's pretty much all the main features. And then again, like I said, you have the monitor, which you're able to do the false color, and then the total output, which you're able to kind of shut this on and off. So let's look at it before and after really quick. So this was before, and this was after with our film look. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I did a fantastic job color grading, but I'd say it looks pretty close to what the original image looks like. There's definitely a lot more oranges and yellows, and this one is pretty much strictly greens. But overall, I think it did a pretty nice job, you know, achieving that kind of film look. And then down here, we have the LUT generator, which is really nice if you want to kind of save this for later or be able to input it into your camera, you know, for a reference, or like I said, be able to use it in other editing software. And down here, you have the ability to check profiles, which basically updates the app in case they add other film profiles or camera profiles. So overall, with using this in Premiere Pro, this was a really nice tool to be able to try to achieve the film look. It's definitely a lot better than other plugins I've used where they're mainly focusing on the film grain and not so much a lot of those little nuances that we adjusted throughout this tutorial. And while there's a lot of different settings, I would say this is pretty easy to use for the most part. I didn't know what every single little setting was. That's probably going to be something I'm going to have to research into later. And I'm sure you're able to find that information on their website or elsewhere. And like I said, I put together some other shots here that I'm going to show some before and afters with. Again, for me, the biggest benefit here are those little details. I am a detail-oriented guy, and I definitely love seeing those little details that I'm able to adjust to achieve that look a little bit more than with other plugins. My color grading skills are not great, but I would say this app definitely did a good job of trying to mimic those details from these shots. But what if we don't have a fancy camera or editing software like I do? Dehancer has a mobile version that we can basically do all the same things. I'm not going to go through this entire process again, but let's go ahead and look at all the key features from this interface. You can upload either a video or photo for editing. It's currently compatible with both iPhone and iPad. The mobile app gives you the ability to choose a different preset, or you're able to manually adjust everything like we did on desktop. So with the presets, we have the different film stock. We're able to manually choose the film profile, and then we're able to adjust exposure. We have the developer like we do on the desktop app. You can see on the bottom of the app that pretty much all the same features from Premiere Pro are here in the app as well, with some noted features like the gate weave and the film breath. Again, probably something that I'm not going to use, but you do have the ability to use it if you'd like. Dehancer says it's not an ordinary app with different filters necessarily. They claim that there's years of scientific research behind their technology. You'll have to take those claims at face value, but I can see that they put a lot of work into these different features. Here's some before and afters of the video I took. I took a similar video as I did on the desktop version, just did it with my phone instead. And again, there's also the photo editing capabilities if you want to use this app for photo editing. Now let's get into if I think this software is worth purchasing or not and who it's for. The prices of this app vary depending on which version you get. I will note that Dehancer has a light version, which has a little bit less features than the Pro version, but that wasn't the version I was given, so we're not going to talk about it specifically. At the time of this recording, the Pro version runs for $449 for a lifetime license, $299 for a 1-year license, $199 for a 6-month license, and $149 for a 3-month license. And on mobile, it's $399 for a lifetime license, $89.99 for 1 year, $9.99 for 1 month, and $5.99 for 1 week. Obviously, that's very expensive for a plugin app, but it could be worth it depending on what your workflow is. Like obviously, if you're only going to use it every once in a while, it would make more sense for you to get those shorter term licenses instead of the lifetime. And if you plan on using it pretty religiously, like on every single one of your films, because you're just in love with that look, then obviously the lifetime license is probably going to make more sense for you. If I'm being honest, I just could not see myself ever using the mobile version of this app. I don't do any video editing or photo editing on mobile, so it just doesn't make sense for me to spend that kind of money on this. But that's for me. Maybe you do all of your editing on your mobile device and this could be worth it for you. I would definitely recommend maybe trying those shorter term licenses first to give it a test run to see if it's really worth it for you to get the mobile version. That $400 price tag is definitely a little bit too steep for me to recommend it completely. But again, I do like that they have those shorter term licenses. If I were to purchase Dehancer, it would obviously be one of the desktop versions. I will say for sure, there's definitely nothing else that I've come across on the market like this app. I could definitely see this software being worth it for the right type of filmmaker. If you are a YouTuber, like I'm making videos right now, this makes absolutely no sense for you to purchase. If you're making a lot of feature films or short films where you really want to dive into this kind of look, then 100% I would recommend this to you. I also think that the light version can suffice if you're not looking for features like the halation, the gate weave, the film damage, etc. And that's probably going to be fine for most people. That's probably the version I would buy specifically, especially as, you know, if you go back and watch all the different settings that I was messing with, pretty much all of them that I was really excited about were in the light version anyway. The Pro version is obviously just going to give you a lot more options altogether. And I don't know 100% if you're able to just upgrade from the light to the Pro over time. However, I think this is a fantastic tool for indie filmmakers if you were trying to get the film look without paying the film price. Again, if you're looking to pick up this software, Dehancer did give me an affiliate link, which is down in the description. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.